Welcome to the SANE Show. Get ready to eat more and exercise less to burn a whole lot of fat and radically improve your health.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that. Hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to the SANE Show. I have with me Mr. Jonathan Bailor, and I'm Carrie Brown.
Carrie, we are here with the SANE Show.
Yes.
It's very exciting, listeners. We're actually going to be recording, and you're hopefully going to hear it, or you already heard it at the beginning of the show, but we haven't recorded it yet. This is like time travel. As you're listening to this, Carrie and I are planning what we're going to say on the new intro and outro bumper since we renamed the show The SANE Show, which we're going to record immediately after recording this show. It's like we're spending space and time right now.
So we're telling you something that you actually already know.
Exactly. We don't know it. You actually know more than we know right now. This is confusing me, Carrie. Well, you know what else is confusing?
What
is the actual topic of today's show? Because you said, Jonathan, let's talk about something. I don't really know what we should say about it, but it seems like a good idea. I thought it sounded like a good idea too, but I don't know where it's going to go.
The other awesome thing before we get started is it feels like the show studio is back to normal.
It's not 120 degrees in the show studio anymore.
Plus, I am wearing your socks.
You are wearing my socks, and it is a little bit cooler, which is great, but we are certainly going to heat it up like we always do. So what is our topic for today, Carrie?
Temptation.
Ooh.
No, not like that. This is a family show.
This is the SANE Show After Dark. It's the new and improved, because I usually when we publish these shows, we can set the rating. We usually set it to G. Are we gonna have to set it up to PG or PG-13?
No.
Okay, so what kind of
Jonathan,
temptation?
I've been single for 7.5 years.
Well, so then you know about temptation.
No. I live with 6 cats, Jonathan.
So what kind of temptation are we talking about, Carrie?
Food. Well, not just food, actually, because this would apply to anything in a sane lifestyle that you find difficult to resist doing or not doing. So this could also apply to the temptation not to go to the gym and do your eccentrics every weekend or whatever day you go, or the temptation to, or avoiding the temptations of the cupcakes in the office, or avoiding the temptation to stay in bed 5 minutes longer and not get up and make that SANE smoothie.
So it's the temptation to be insane, for lack of better terms.
Yes, because I think a lot of people, this is probably what derails them.
There's a lot of good stuff here, Carrie. There's a lot of good stuff here. Two strategies that I can think of off the top of my head based off of research, and then we can get into some more commonsensical approaches. The first is using a concept of your future self, which I know sounds a little bit weird, but there's this concept in human psychology. And now we're getting into the other definition of sane, which is psychologically sane, which is the immediacy bias, which is, or future discounting, where things right now, like feeling good right now, we bias towards that, even if we're going to feel terrible in 5 minutes, because feeling good right now is
feeling good right now.
Feeling good right now, right? So what some people, actually AJ Jacobs, who's the editor-in-chief of Esquire magazine, friend of the show, been on a couple times. Hopefully folks have enjoyed our chats as much as I have. He wrote a book called Drop Dead Healthy, and he's writing another book now. And one of the things he talks about is in Drop Dead Healthy, he goes on these quests. So for example, he wrote a book called A Year of Living Biblically, where he tried to do everything in the Bible literally. So for example, in the Bible, They talk about, you wear certain clothes, you don't eat certain foods, you don't do certain things. He took that literally, did it, and wrote a book about it. He did the same thing in terms of health and fitness, where he looked for every crazy diet, exercise fad he could find on the internet, and then he did it. And then at the end of the book, he reflects on what works and what doesn't work. And what he found was one very simple exercise he found to be most effective for him. And AJ is a great example because AJ is not a fitness or health guy, right? He's pretty typical dude, lives in downtown Manhattan. Was just imagining his future self. And the way he did this, so he has children. I know a lot of our listeners do. Not everyone does. But if you have children, this can be a little bit easier because what you do is you try to think about yourself in the future. So you think about you with your grandkids, or you with your children as adults, or just you maybe in retirement. And you try to like perceive that person as a different person and a person who you want to be nice to. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but what I see a lot of people struggle with is in temptation, we're in a hot state and we're thinking. Often we're not thinking. We're using the animal part of our brain. We're in a very emotional state. But if we can take a step back and disconnect from that emotional state and look out into the future a little bit, and if we can have a concrete thing to look at, aka our future self, that can sometimes be the pattern interrupt. If folks are familiar with Tony Robbins, he uses that term a lot. It can be the pattern interrupt that allows us to break away from that temptation for an instant. But sometimes that's all we need is that quick interrupt, and then we can free ourselves from that moment of temptation.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a great thing to think about. It also just struck me while you were talking that and again, I don't have children, but I've seen this in so many of my friends and kind of parents in general, is that they don't let children drink coffee until they're a certain age, or there's things that you wouldn't let your children do that you do yourself, and generally unhealthy things that you wouldn't do yourself, or you encourage your children to exercise because you think it's good for them, or you encourage them to eat their vegetables because you think it's good for them. But something happens when we become adults that we don't give ourselves the same care and attention and education as we do to children.
This is just coming on the fly right now, Carrie, but I'm thinking that last time I was visiting my in-laws, who are just these wonderful, wonderful people, Carolyn and Terry, and I asked Terry I don't know how this came up, but I asked him, so this is my wife's father, I asked him, I think they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary, which is an amazing achievement. And I said, Terry, I asked them both. This is what I was asking Terry in this instance. I said, Terry, what is your number one piece of advice for being as happy as you and Carolyn are after 40 years of marriage? And he paused and he said, Jonathan, always have something to look forward to with your spouse. And I think that applies here because we all like having something to look forward to. And we know the common wisdom of the journey is actually usually more satisfying than the actual endpoint. A lot of people who have achieved goals in their life realize, that's not nearly as satisfying to reach as I thought it was, but the journey is very satisfying. So think about having something to look forward to in terms of a holiday or a present or a vacation, but then think about looking forward to yourself in the future. Let me unpack that a little bit. So often we might think of ourselves in the present, and we might be a little bit down on ourselves, or we might think of some things we did in the past. We may have some regrets, and hopefully we don't have a lot of that, but we might have that. But one thing that's cool about the future and the concept of future self is you can look forward to your future self based on what you're going to do today.
Right.
So you can say, I'm not where I want to be today, but that's okay because I'm going to do these things today, and I'm going to get into these habits, and I can look forward to the future self that I'm going to create. So it's almost like saying we look forward, when we're children, we look forward to Christmas, or now as adults, we may look forward to the weekend, or we may look forward to our next vacation. But can we make our minds look forward to the future us?
Right. So that could be as simple as 6 months from now, I'm looking forward to feeling healthier, sleeping better, enjoying going to the gym once a week, any of those things, whatever your goals are. But, in 6 months, I'm excited about feeling better than I do now.
This actually is what we do in the Calorie Myth book. I just recalled this. There's a section called Smarter Psychology. And what we do is this exercise. It's similar to affirmations, but in my experience, it's more scientifically founded. Not to knock affirmations at all, but Nathaniel Branden, who is a quite influential psychiatrist or psychologist, came up with this technique called sentence completion, where it's basically what we're talking about here. And these are the exercises we take people through in the book. Is you have a sentence stem, which is, when I eat sanely, I'm excited to blank. When I eat sanely, I'm excited to blank. And the exercise is to just sit down for 5 minutes and fill in that sentence as many times as you can. And what you're trying, really that's an exercise in your future self. You're trying to create as many reasons in your mind to do that which is sane, because what you're going to have is this temptation and this animalistic side of your brain that really doesn't have your best interests in mind.
That just wants a tasty cupcake right now.
Exactly. So unless you take steps, unless you do these things like you imagine your future self, or you do affirmations, or you do some kind of pattern interrupt or sentence completion, that I think the first step is identify that you're in a state of temptation. And then the second step is have some sort of strategy or technique to let to be technical, to let your neocortex, the front part of your brain, the brain that makes you not the same as other animals on the planet, allow that to then calm down your amygdala, or the animal part of your brain. And this is what separates us from other animals, is we can say, I have to go to the bathroom right now. I'm tempted to go to the bathroom in my pants because I really have to go to the bathroom, but I'm not going to. That's kind of a silly example, but when you think about it, right, think about small people, babies, right? That I got to go to the bathroom. Well,
there we go.
Bathroom time, I want to eat something insane. Well, eat insane time. But what the criteria by which we say you're a mature adult in some ways is your ability to say that which your animal brain tells you to do right now, you can consciously choose to give into or not. And if you can project yourself into the future and have these clear goals, more often than not, you'll choose the sane approach.
I think one of the things you said a few minutes ago that was really important is that you acknowledge that it's a temptation. Mm-hmm. And while you were talking there, the other thing, it reminded me of a Stephen Covey quote, and
love Stephen Covey.
Paraphrasing because I can't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of, it's easy to say no when there's a bigger yes burning within.
Yes. That is one of my favorite quotes ever.
I massacred the quote, but,
yeah. Well, a great example of that, Carrie, is veganism. So people want to talk about temptation. People want to talk about sometimes, sane eating can be a challenge in certain instances. I cannot imagine being a vegan. Right? I'm a pretty self-disciplined person, and the thought of never eating an animal product of any form ever again is holy moly. But most vegans not only do it, but if you talk to someone who's been a vegan for over a year, it's not as if they wake up in the morning and they're like, oh my God, I wish I could eat some bacon. It's so hard to not eat bacon. They don't want to eat bacon, even though I bet eating bacon, if you could do a brain scan, well, I don't know. I'm curious if it would activate the same dopamine centers as it would for someone who isn't a vegan. But vegans personify this Covey quote. They have a deeper yes. They have a moralistic belief, which it's almost like, have you heard of this drug Chantix?
No.
So there's this, I don't know if it's new, but so my brother is a smoker. He's trying to quit smoking, and he's now on this medication called Chantix. And the way Chantix works is it makes cigarettes disgusting. So if you
taste, it's the
correct.
taste. Okay.
So if you if you take Chantix and you smoke, it's a bit almost like a Pavlovian conditioning, where it's like you take a dog and the dog does something and you tase it. And if you do that, I mean, don't tase your dog. That's what you should do. Anytime you feel a sense of temptation, get a cattle prod and just tase yourself. No, I'm just kidding. And then after a while, you'll be like, this is terrible. But the point here is that deeper yes burning inside. That can apply to food, and it can apply to food in a very deep way, as evidenced by vegans or even by people who do religious dietary restrictions like kosher or halal individuals who have this deeper yes burning inside, which allows them to take that step back.
So you have just reminded me what I was thinking as I was driving down the freeway, and I thought temptation would be a good show topic.
All right, so here we are, 15 minutes into the show. What do we got here, Carrie?
It was exactly what you've just said, but people who don't smoke don't make that decision every time someone offers them a cigarette.
Great distinction.
They've already made that decision. They just don't smoke. They don't have to think about it. When someone offers them a cigarette, or drinking's the same. When somebody offers me a drink, I don't have to think about whether I want a drink or not. I don't drink. Mm-hmm. I don't drink alcohol. Mm-hmm. So I'm not continually, it's not a temptation.
Yep.
Because at some point in my life, 23 years ago, I made a decision that I don't drink. I only had to make that decision once.
Yep.
And I don't struggle when people offer me a glass of wine now. I'm like, no thanks, I don't drink.
That's an identity tie-in, Carrie. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, because once something becomes part of our identity, how we see ourselves. So vegans, that's an identity. Kosher, halal, people who don't drink, or people who are straight edge, or a lot of us we don't have to we're not tempted to try heroin. We're not like, man, I mean, from all accounts I've heard, people who take heroin, the act of taking heroin is quite enjoyable when you do it. But I doubt that there are very many people listening to the show that actively feel tempted to try heroin. Why? Because they see themselves. Their identity is, I would not take heroin. That's just part of my identity. I'm not a illegal drug user.
Right. It's just not something I do. So
I think the key thing then is we have to start to say that, well, and that's again why dieting is so ridiculous, because dieting is this, it's consciously saying, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I do.
It's a temporary thing.
I'm going to do this temporary thing. And we wonder why we're tempted. Whereas if someone says, look, I'm actually, usually when people become vegans or vegetarians, something happens and they're like, I'm never eating animal products again. Done. And they don't do it for 21 days. They don't do it for 2 weeks.
But they don't have to make that decision every day when they're faced with meat, because they just don't eat meat.
So I think we've hit on really two key things so far, Carrie. The first is, one, ideally you hopefully you don't have to make the decision each time it comes up, because this is something that's tied to your identity, and hopefully digging into the science, the not counting calories, and celebrating the abundance of nutritious food and healing your body and taking on that mindset can make sanity part of your identity. So we would need to make an identity shift. We also, assuming we can't do that overnight, we need to have ways to, in the moment of temptation, take a step back from that. So develop an identity that blocks temptation in some ways. Then have techniques to calm temptation when it happens. I think there's also a third strategy, which is I learned from my mother, because she used to always say, Jonathan, avoid the occasion of sin. I was raised in a very strict Roman Catholic household, so we use the term sin a lot. And she would just say, Jonathan, for example, if you're in a committed romantic relationship, it's a lot easier to not be tempted to cheat on your spouse if you don't go to nightclubs. Because so, right. If you only are ever around people who don't smoke, it's much easier to not be tempted to start smoking, because it would be weird to start smoking. So there's tie your identity to noble motives such that you aren't tempted. Then there is essentially distract yourself from temptation. Then there is, can you structure your life such that you avoid temptation in the first place?
But the flip of this is that you can also, this will help you in when we're talking about things being part of our identity, you can also look at it as, I go to the gym on Saturday. Mm-hmm. That's just what I do. Mm-hmm. I do it, it's not like I have to make a decision every Saturday. Am I going to go or not? I go to the gym on a Saturday for
Absolutely.
15 minutes. That's what I do. I go to yoga on a Tuesday night.
Yep.
Every Tuesday, I'm lying on the floor, stretching and napping. That's what I do. So you can also look at it as, I don't do these things, or I do these things, and you don't have to make a decision every time you're confronted with choices.
And if you look at what the point we're making here, Carrie, is not only supported by science, but if you just look at humanity, when people, for example, if someone says, I'm an American, or I'm Roman Catholic, or I'm a marathoner, not I'm going to run a marathon, I'm a marathoner, not I'm going to go to church this week, I'm Roman Catholic. When people make that distinction from, I'm gonna try to not eat starches and sweets and maybe eat some whole nutrient-dense foods when I can, versus I am a sane person.
Right.
And I believe at the core of my being that starvation, just eating fewer calories of toxic edible products, is absurd and dehumanizing, and that it's a repressive model that is frankly deadly when misapplied, and that nature has given us such an abundant bounty of real healing foods that we almost have a moral obligation, especially considering the fact that we have now ushered in a generation of children that have a lower life expectancy than their parents, and we have a worldwide obesity rate which is causing more suffering than pretty much any other condition on this planet right now, that we can go sane, we can be sane. And when we see ourselves, this isn't just something we dabble in, this isn't just a fad, this isn't just a diet, this isn't just a temporary thing. It's a respectable and noble and necessary way of life, just like being environmentally responsible. We now know that what we did in the past is not sustainable, and we all have to take steps to be more environmentally responsible. So recycling, right? We all just do it now. Exactly.
It's become what we do.
Yep.
We recycle. We don't throw everything in the trash. We have a yard waste, and we have a recycling, and we have a trash. And now wherever you go, public places, there's several garbage cans for those different things, and it's just become part of who we are. And
this is why, this is going to get me in some trouble with some people, but oh well. This is why the mainstream myth of moderation is so ridiculous, which is this, oh, well, it's just a 100-calorie snack pack, or just have one soda per week. That, it's very easy to see when logic is just flawed, because that logic is just saying, it's okay if you just do a little bit of it. That is not ask if you're married, ask your spouse if it's okay if you just cheat on them a little bit sometimes.
Or if it's okay if you kiss other people, but as long as you don't go any further.
Right, because what that actually indicates is that you in your mind, there's some sort of either dissatisfaction or, right, it's like there's a crack in the armor where if a vegan doesn't eat animal products on occasion because that's inconsistent with their identity.
It's just not what they do.
But see, the identity that is being communicated by these mainstream moderation marketers is the identity of materialism and the identity of, I should be able to have everything and do everything that I want, which is fine. Like, it's America. You can do whatever you want. But like Covey said, you pick up one end, you can choose your actions. but you can't choose the consequences of your actions, right? So what we're trying to do here on the SANE Show and everything that we do is to outline the actions that are not only enjoyable, but that are also going to have positive consequences for you with no ulterior motive. When you're seeing other things in the media, you got to be on the lookout for example, the myth of moderation. If I owned PepsiCo, I would want everyone to believe in the myth of moderation, because that means every single edible product I produce, you can eat as long as you eat it in moderation, which is, of course, ridiculous.
Right.
Anyway, that's just that was like a little...
Like, have you finished? Is there something more?
Tirade, rampage. So just let's quickly summarize here, Carrie, because I think this is, while we started out not really sure what we were talking about, I think we covered some really helpful ground here. So let me know if I miss anything, but we've covered 3 big ways to look at temptation. Big hammer number 1 is, if you can avoid the situation in which you'll be tempted, that makes it a heck of a lot easier. Right. So if you can not go into Baskin-Robbins, that will make it a lot easier to not be tempted to eat Baskin-Robbins ice cream. Right. Easy, but not always.
Yeah, don't even walk in the door.
Don't even walk in the door. Don't walk through the snack food aisle. Option number 2, over time, and there's no quick way to do this. It's listen to these shows, get involved in the paleo community, read books, immerse yourself in the science, develop an identity that just says,
I live a sane lifestyle.
I live a sane life. These other things are repugnant. They're as repulsive to me as taking cocaine.
They're just not something I do.
They're just disgusting. And then the third thing would be, if you can't avoid the occasion of temptation, and if you haven't yet developed that identity, come up with strategies and techniques such as imagining your future self or having these strong, compelling goals, such that in the short term, you can interrupt that animal brain, which is trying to get you to poop in your pants.
Right.
For lack of better terms, because if we just let our animal brain run wild, we'd go to the bathroom anytime and anywhere we wanted. So don't do that. That's not a good idea. And I think we can all agree on that.
That would create an awful lot of laundry.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Carrie, we promised our listeners that moving forward, we would give them 1 action step per week. So I think an action step for this week, which would be a useful one for folks, is to think of each week, maybe I'll come up with one, you come up with one. So each week, think about an occasion which consistently tempts you to be insane, and try to use one of the approaches we talked about here. Is it possible for you to avoid that situation? That would be my action item for you for this week, is try to identify a consistent source of temptation. Can you figure out a way to live your life fully and happily while avoiding it? What about you, Carrie?
My action would be think about a burning yes that will help you to say no.
I love it. I love it. And I think for a lot of our listeners, that's going to have to do with other people in your life, because sometimes we treat ourselves worse than we treat other people. But if you can think about people you love or that love you, and how you want to be able to serve them and be with them in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I think you can find that yes pretty easily. So, but
also just feeling better.
Absolutely.
If you're a diabetic, not being, if you're,
yeah.
That's kind of what I mean. Find a burning yes that will make it easy for you to say no to whatever is causing you not to live in that yes right now.
I love it, Carrie. This is fabulous. Well, listeners, I hope this helps you to avoid temptation, get that burning yes inside, and to stay sane. So remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better, and remember, stay sane.
See ya.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like what you hear and you want more free goodness, be sure to hop over to sanesolution.com and grab your free plan. Again, that's sanesolution.com and grab your free plan.
And for a little bit of crazy and a whole